Motivation is not something you find, it's something you build. But most people are doing it wrong. Let's fix that. People are
You ever have one of those days where you feel totally unstoppable, and then the next day just getting out of bed feels like climbing Mount Everest? We're always told the answer is just more willpower, right? More discipline. But what if the real secret to long-term motivation isn't about forcing it at all? What if it's about understanding the actual science of what drives us? So let's dive into that science and figure out how we can tap into it, every single day. First, we gotta tackle what I call the motivation paradox. It's this really weird disconnect between our natural, built-in potential for energy and growth and the fact that so often we just feel completely and totally drained. I mean, seriously, who hasn't felt this? That feeling of being stuck, maybe a little apathetic, or just flat out burnt out. You know you could be doing more, but you just can't seem to find the gas in the tank. Well, it turns out there's a really deep psychological reason for that feeling. So researchers Richard Ryan and Edward Deci basically pointed out these two fundamental states we can be in. On one hand, we can be proactive and engaged. We're curious, we're full of life, we're striving. And on the other hand, we can be passive and alienated, apathetic, and just kind of waiting for things to happen. But here's the kicker, the part that changes everything. The research shows these aren't fixed personality traits. Nope. They are largely a product of our social environment. So the big question becomes, what creates these conditions, and how do we build an environment that actually encourages that proactive side of us? Well, the answer lies in this really powerful idea called self-determination theory. Think of it as the key that unlocks this whole motivation puzzle. And it all starts with something that's actually pretty simple, but totally profound. And here it is, the big aha moment. Just like our bodies need physical nutrients, food, water, air, our minds have basic needs too. The theory calls them psychological nutrients. And it's simple. When these needs are met, we thrive. When they're not, our motivation, our well-being, it all just withers. Okay, so nutrient number one is competence. This is our deep down innate need to feel like we're good at what we do and that we're getting better. It's about feeling effective, seeing that you're making progress, and mastering challenges. It's that awesome feeling of, hey, I got this. I can actually do this. Next up, we have autonomy. Now, this doesn't mean you have to be totally independent or go live in a cabin in the woods. It's really about feeling like you're the author of your own actions, that you have a sense of choice, and that what you're doing actually lines up with your own values. It's the huge difference between doing something because you have to and doing it because you choose to. And the final nutrient is relatedness. Look, we are fundamentally social creatures. We have this powerful need to feel connected to other people, to care for them, and to feel like they care for us. That sense of belonging is an absolute cornerstone of our psychological health. So there you have it. Competence, autonomy, and relatedness. Those are the big three. Okay, so how do these three needs actually affect our daily motivation? Well, it's really easy to think of motivation as like a switch. It's either on or it's off. But the reality is way more interesting than that. So instead of a switch, picture motivation as a spectrum. On one end, you've got actions that feel completely controlled by outside forces. And on the other, you have actions that are genuinely self-determined. They come right from your core. The real goal is to figure out how to move ourselves along this spectrum toward that self-determined side. This chart here shows that journey perfectly. It's called the self-determination continuum. And I know it looks a little academic, but trust me, it's an incredibly useful map for understanding why on earth we do the things we do. We're going to walk through it from left to right, from a total lack of motivation to the most powerful, sustainable kind there is. So way over on the far left, you've got amotivation. This is that running on empty state we talked about earlier. You just have no intention to act. Maybe you don't see the point, or you feel like you couldn't do it even if you tried. Your need for competence is just completely starved here. The first little step up is called external regulation. This is where you're doing something, but only because of an external carrot or a stick. You're doing it to get a reward or to avoid getting in trouble. It's the least autonomous kind of motivation out there because the why you're doing it is completely outside of yourself. Next is introjected regulation. Oof, this one's tricky because the pressure has now moved inside your own head. You're motivated to avoid feeling guilty, or maybe to get that little ego boost of feeling proud. It's that nagging voice in your head that says, I should really do this. It's internal, yeah, but it still feels controlling, and it often brings a ton of anxiety with it. It is not true autonomy. And finally, we arrive at the holy grail, way over on the right side of the spectrum, integrated and intrinsic motivation. This is it. This is where you do something because it's genuinely important to you and it lines up with your core values. That's integration. Or you do it just for the pure fun and satisfaction of the activity itself. That's intrinsic. This is the sweet spot. This is where motivation becomes sustainable because it's truly, finally coming from you. Okay, so that's the theory. Awesome. But how do we actually use this stuff? How do we move ourselves along that spectrum in real life, especially with things like our health and fitness? Let's get practical. I absolutely love this quote from physiologist Ollie Patrick. He frames it perfectly. It's not about forcing yourself, it's about managing an ecosystem. Every single choice we make is either a deposit or a withdrawal from our energy bank. And that mindset right there, that's the bridge from theory to practice. So, how do we make deposits into our energy bank? Well, we do it by intentionally feeding those 3 psychological needs. First, to foster competence, you gotta forget about perfection. Seriously, focus on small, consistent wins. That's what builds momentum and makes you feel capable. Second, into build autonomy, get to know your own body. Understanding your own data, like how you're sleeping, what your stress is like, that empowers you to make informed choices that are right for you, not for somebody else. Third, and this is so important, support recovery. Rest isn't lazy, it's a non-negotiable part of the performance equation. It's a biological need. And finally, find what's sustainable. The perfect plan is totally useless if you can't stick with it. The best plan is always the one that feels autonomous and doable for you, right now. This whole way of thinking lets us just throw out some of those old, tired myths. The old way, no pain, no gain, just push through it, that's a recipe for draining your psychological needs and ending up right back at amotivation. It wrecks your autonomy and it crushes your sense of competence. The new, smarter way is all about supporting those needs. It understands that recovery is productive, that sustainable systems will always beat short-term intensity, and that training smarter will always win out over just training harder. So let's put this all together. What is the final equation for building motivation that actually sticks around? Here is the single most important thing to take away from all this. Stop seeing motivation as some kind of battle of willpower. It is not about brute force. It is an act of intelligent design. It's about consciously building a daily environment in your work, in your health, in your relationships that consistently feeds your needs for competence, autonomy, and relatedness. And that brings us to the final question. A question for you. This isn't about some massive life overhaul you have to start tomorrow. It's just about small, deliberate shifts. So looking at your day-to-day, what's one small thing you can do? Just one little thing to feel a tiny bit more capable, a little more in charge, or a little more connected to someone. Because that right there, that's where it all begins.
Small steps create real change. Join the journey. Thanks for watching this video.